Hey, everybody, welcome to this is probably going to be a bonus BS episode with Phil Vecchione, who is, if you aren't familiar with Phil, who needs no introduction on gaming and BS by any means, because he's been on our show, I think, at least once, if not twice. He's the co-host of Misdirected Mark podcast, as well as Pandas Talking Games. Check out those two. We'll put links in the show notes. And as well as working at Encoded Designs, one of the principals at Encoded Designs, the publishing house that even helped Brett put out Streets of Avalon, and a variety of other gaming credentials, Never Unprepared and Masks and a few others. And so welcome back, Phil. It's been a long time. It's so good to see you again. I hope everything is doing well in your world.
I'm rocking the lockdown. Coming around on coming down on a full year, but thanks for having me on. It's awesome seeing you. I know I haven't seen you in a while because as soon as I saw you, I was like, oh man, check, like, the hair is.
Oh my God, dude, I don't like it at all.
I did that in grad school. I was so poor in grad school that I just didn't cut my hair for a year, and I had it, like, it was so tragically 90s. I had like two ponytails. I had like the top in one ponytail and like the back in one ponytail, and then I doubled down and went. When I finally got a haircut, I went for a full mullet.
Nice.
And just kept like the back ponytail for, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. It was pretty bad. I cut it off for a job interview, which was totally worth it. One, for getting rid of it, and two, because I did get the job. So
I have taken an interest in Forbidden Lands, as some of our listeners know, and I put it out on Twitter and said, hey, I'm looking to run this thing, and I could use some advice, because when I got it, I started pouring through it and thought, well, this is a little more dense than I might have anticipated, even though I got like the big grandiose box. I got like the GM screen, the cards, the dice. Like,
oh yeah, yeah.
And then I got it and I opened up the books and went, okay, there's quite a bit here. Okay, well, that's all right. I probably should have looked into this before dropping, 100 plus bones. But so Phil goes, yeah, man, I'm running it. How many sessions are you into?
So next Sunday, because I play bi-weekly, next Sunday will be my 40th session.
How many over how much period of time?
What did we start? We started in summer of 19.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Summer of 19.
How often are you running?
Every 2 weeks.
Okay, that's that. I probably could have done the math. So when you meet Phil, how long are your sessions?
So in person, before the Rona, in person we were playing like 3.5 hours ish. Online, I got it down to, like, it's somewhere between 2.5 to 3. Zoom's just a little, like, Zoom gaming is just, I don't know, a little bit slower, a little bit more draining than I'd playing in person.
Yeah. So I brought Phil on here because, one, I know Phil, and I said, hey man, I'm looking for tips. Would you be interested? When can we talk? And I said, hey, I stream Saturdays if you're interested. And he said, yeah, sure. Saturday will work. So thanks for accommodating, Phil. And
yeah, no problem.
So we're going to be talking about Forbidden Lands. Forbidden Lands, specifically, like what Phil's doing, so Sean could take that and take it back to his group and help him run a better game. So, you started about 2019. When did you get it, and how long did it take for you to kick it off?
I had it for a little while. I like wound up buying it just because I liked the I liked the pitch for it, right? Like, just, what is it, rogues and raiders in a cursed world, and the whole idea of just like a hex, like almost like a hex. I mean, it's a hex crawl of gaming, right? So I was like, cool, I'll dig it. And I think I just had to wait until there was a opening in my game group between games, and then everybody was like, yeah, let's give it a try. And I figured I was just going to run it. Like, I honestly thought I was going to just run it for like 6-7 sessions or something and be done with it. But it took on a life of its own. And now, like, my players are just like, no, keep it going, man. Like, just like, don't, like, just, we're fine. We're good. Like, I periodically check in. I'm like, you guys sure you still want to play this? They're like, no, we're good. Let's keep going.
Oh. Yeah. Going on 2 years.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So what led you to look into Forbidden Lands?
So I really liked that the game emphasizes travel. So I play, I play. I mean, I play a bunch of different games, but I play a lot of indie games, and you know, travel is often a thing you just like hand wave, right? You're just like, well, you leave town, a few days later, you arrive in new town, right? Like that's it. Or hey, you finished dungeon, time to go home. Um,
You travel, and you travel some more.
right, and that's it, right? Like, not like, and what I thought was cool about the game is the game mechanizes travel, and it's not just like, and it's not mechanized like other fantasy games where it's like, oh, there might be a random encounter plus, you can your horse moves this much per day kind of thing. Like there are actually like things you do. Like there's a whole subsystem for traveling, which at first, I mean, you got to be into that, right? Like you just got to buy into that premise. Like part of this game is that you travel. Um, and so that was the thing I was really curious about because I mean, I've played tons of fantasy games like killing monsters, casting spells. Like I've done that pretty much everywhere, but I hadn't played too many games that really settled in and was like travel is an actual part of this game.
Yeah.
So that was the thing I really wanted to see when I took it out to play it.
Yeah, I was. It's not wholly dissimilar from me. When I read the premise of the game, I thought, it pitches itself old school and hex crawl, and it makes no qualms about what that is, and putting it in the game as the forefront to the game. I thought, okay, and I've been telling people, you can get Swords and Wizardry, you can get Labyrinth Lord, you can get first edition, second edition, OSCE, all that stuff, and there are folks that are running great hex crawls.
Oh yeah.
But this is okay. It's part of the game, and this is, which was, I thought, I'm like, I wonder what their take is, and I think that's what drew me into exploring it a little bit. So interesting.
Yeah, I like, so what I like about it is that like it very much wants to be um like a retro. I mean, I think they brand themselves as a retro RPG, right? So I don't think they don't call themselves old school. So it's very much like a retro feeling RPG. The interior artwork is black and white line art, and I think it was done by I don't think we'll recognize it, but in Sweden it was like kind of like their Aerolotus, right? Like they're like did all the black and white line art. But it's got some pretty actually like more modern mechanics that I really like. Like their way of dealing with food, water, arrows, torches, things like that. They use a resource die, kind of like the Black Hack, and I think a bunch of other games do it, where you have a die, like you have D8 water, and then at the end of the day you roll your D8, and if you get a 1, you switch the die from a D8 to a D6, right? And until you run out. So it's got all of that in it, but yet still feels pretty, like it still feels like I'm playing a game from the 80s, and it has a few good nods. Like the map the map is not predefined. Like it has stuff on it, but it's got like pictures of villages and castles, and they don't correspond to anything in the game. You have to decide like, oh, I'm going to put this village here on the map. And that reminds me of like when I was a kid, like getting old school Boot Hill and old school Gamma World, where they gave you like the big blank hex map, and you had to fill in those things yourself in pencil. Loved it.
So going into the map, I mean, we'll be all over the place, but
Sure, sure.
since we brought up the map, it does have a few icons. It has obviously the terrain. And maybe we should start out even for viewers, like what is the premise of Forbidden Lands? So, and I could start by just saying at 100-foot view, in like a couple of sentences, there was the blood mist that had been around for 300 years.
Yep.
And it's lifted. And
yeah, so the blood mist kept you from traveling too far from your home. Like if the sun went down and you were not home, the blood mist would just kill you, with the rare exception of a few people like the Rust brothers can move through it or whatever. But for the most part, if you are caught out in the blood mist, you died. So for 300 years, villages never expanded. They didn't trade with one another. They were all isolated, right? They're just like little islands scattered all over this place called Ravenland. And then 5 years before the game begins, the blood mist disappears. And so now you have this period of time where people are trying to find Like they're trying to explore, connect to other villages, finding the ruins of whatever happened 300 years ago, that kind of thing. And traveling is new for everybody. Like it's only 5 years old. That's like the main, like that's the hook of the game right there.
Now, so going back to the map, because I didn't want to lose sight of that,
Yeah, yep.
because the map's got a few things, but it's up to the game master to put things in whatever hex that they want, however they want. And with your game specifically, Phil, how are you handling that? Are you taking images that are on the map and actually keeping those there, or are you saying, "Oh, it says it's on your map, but you get there and there's nothing there, weird," or it's a ruin, or have you? I guess are you running? I'll let you answer that.
So I've been pretty faithful to the map, right? So like if it's on the map, I've been just like when the players get there's a village. What is not a faithful narrator are the legends. So there are these. So for all the like for all the locations of the game, and they're called adventuring sites. For all the adventuring sites, they come with a legend that the players have either heard of, or if you want to have them make a skill roll, they suddenly remember the legend about this place. Those are semi-unreliable narrators. Like there's some truth to those things, but also these are people who haven't been out of their house like essentially for 300 years, so they don't often understand the full history of things, or they misunderstand how they understand what they see but not how it got there, that kind of thing. So no, if there's a village on the map, when you get there, there's a village. You just may not, from the legend, you may think that something's going on that's not.
Are you running homebrew?
No, I'm actually running the whole thing from published material. So I'm using the GM's book. In the box set has 3 adventure sites. One of them is this town called the Hollows, and that was like the focal point of the game. And then I played that for a while, like just those 3 adventure sites, and then we expanded into I've got it next to me, the Raven's Purge, the campaign book, which is also fully sandboxed. So it gives you like 15 NPCs, a bunch of artifacts, and a bunch of locations, and then tells you like you should figure out how all these connect to each other. Like here's some suggestions, but do with them as you please.
I have Raven's Purge. I thought I was going to run more homebrew, but the more I think about it, I might implement pieces.
It's a pretty good. Yeah. I mean, the Raven's Purge is a full arc. Like you could, if you could play it, start it, finish it. Like it has a beginning, middle, and end to it. That you could do. I mean, I don't think it'll be quick. No. Like my group is like, I think there's 5 artifacts. My group has 1 of them, but they didn't start it for like a year, right? Like for a year, they were doing a whole bunch of other stuff.
So when you kick this off, kind of session 0, we'll start with session. Phil's got Forbidden Lands. Thinking about running this thing. You guys up for it? Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Mm-hmm. You pitch it. They're in. You set up session 0. I would imagine.
Yep.
What did you cover in session 0, and what did you cover, and then what did you learn in the game that you would implement back into session 0 if you were to redo it?
I'm gonna look because I think I've got my game notes right here. I do. I have my session 0 notes.
Oh, fantastic. Look at that. So resourceful, that guy.
Yeah. So my session 0 is actually, I'm looking at it. Like the session 0 is actually pretty light. I think we blended session 0 with character creation. Mm-hmm. So we went through the pitch. Everybody was in. I think the main things I talked about were like, look, these characters are not super resilient. Like, how cool is everybody about just like if your character dies, right? Because even one of the things they give you in the game, and I haven't had to use them, my characters have been on death's door, but nobody's been dead yet, is they give you little gravestone markers, stickers that you can just put on the map. Like when someone dies, you just like, he died right here in this hex. So I definitely went over that with everybody. I was like, look, how cool are we on character death? And then the other thing, because the game and I don't think this is unique to this game, but it doesn't prescribe a thing that you need to do. Like indie games are like really narrow, right? Like when you play other indie games, it's like, look, you are a Mexican drug cartel. Like there's no other options. But like for this game, it's like, all right, well, what do you guys want to do? Like, what are you guys out here for? What are we doing in this game? So, we picked that early on that they were going to be kind of generic adventurers, right? And pick up jobs. They wanted to be able to pick up jobs in the beginning, and and then work from town to town. So the thing I would say is, like, I would make sure you know what the group's purpose is, because you're gonna have plenty of things to find. You're gonna have adventures while you're traveling, but like, why are they traveling? Um, like, why are they traveling, and what are they doing? What's their purpose in the world? Are they gonna are they going to try to vanquish demons? Are they just going to try to get a stronghold and live comfortably? That kind of thing.
Is there anything else that you covered in session 0? That sounds good. That sounds like a good one for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, there are some basic things I always do in game, for session 0. So I always cover safety and
Sure.
those kinds of things. But specific to the game, really, I think it was nailing down, like, who are you guys? Like, what, how do I know what to put out in front of you to make this interesting?
Did you start them in the hollows, or did you start them? Because part of the book, it says put them in a hex.
I did. I dropped them in a hex. I dropped them in a hex between the hollows and another town, and I told them that they were like on their way to the hollows, and like, they were cool with that. And I dropped them in a hex where they found a caravan that had been attacked and waylaid. Like, everybody would, like, there were people killed, there were people missing, and there was just some weird symbol on one of the wagons. And that's where they started, and they wound up finding I kicked it off. They wound up finding this chest with these pewter steins in them, which led them to the hollows, and they find the brewery in the hollows. And that was like that for me was like a throwaway piece, but that brewery in the hollows became like a huge part of my campaign. Like, did not think, like, you never know what's going to stick. This was a thing I was like, oh, so we're just going to do, like, this brewery is like, now this brewery and the characters in it are now just a focal point of this game. Fine. Like, that's cool.
So I've got a feeling that's going to happen every once in a while in a Forbidden Lands game, where you're like, okay, sure, we'll throw that in there.
Well, yeah, they wound up like grabbing onto it, and they just, like, for a chunk of the campaign in the beginning, they were just like, they were escorting beer to other towns. Like, they needed money because they were like dirt poor. So they were like, the guy was like, I'll give you money if you'll, because traveling's dangerous. He's like, I'll give you money if you can get my my casks of beer downriver, or back to the town you came from. And they were like, we'll do it. Like, we need money. So they did. For a while, they were like, they were swords for hire, like, hauling beer, and they loved it. I was like, okay. I'm like, this isn't like this isn't our normal, like, your Lord so and so vanquishing these great evils or whatever. You're like a bunch of dudes hauling beer across the country. But they were so into it. I was like, all right, like, this is the scope of the game we're playing right now.
I can't think of a more admirable task,
Yeah, right,
than escorting beer from town to town.
It's a very noble job.
Indeed. So what is the party makeup, Phil?
Yeah, so I started with three. I started with 3 players, and I had a druid. I had after like a year and a half. I don't even. Oh, I've got him right here. Perfect. It's in my session 0. I've got a druid, elven druid. I've got a goblin hunter, a dwarven fighter, and then a couple, like, about 6 months or so into the game, we added a half elven thief, rogue thief. I forget what their catchy name for it is, but thief.
One of my concerns, because they have orcs and goblins are playable, and then the wolfkin, which are all kind of, yeah. Did you have any reservation about, okay, this person wants to play goblin, this one wants to play orc? They're not, I mean, it's easy to put all the humans in a bucket and then go,
sure,
here, you guys are a group and you're cohesive, just make up some reasons. But when you start implementing those, was there a specific way that you tied them in, or the player tied them into the group?
This is a philosophy I take from trying to think which podcast I got, the Fear the Boot, right? I was like, look, you all get along. Like I like
The
you
group
you can
template.
yeah, you can snipe at each other, but like you can snipe each other, make fun of each other, but you all get along like that. Like I'm not sitting here dealing with I've known these guys long enough, right? I'm just like I'm not into playing like you guys arguing in real life. So figure it out how you want to do it. And yeah, they were I mean they're great. So they were like, yeah, cool, that's no problem. Like we all get that we're a group traveling together. And I made them um come up with some reasons why. So we worked that out in session 0. I just that's the thing I don't unless the game is about that, I got no interest. Like I just quash that as fast as possible.
Yeah. Now they have Pride is a
Yeah.
kind of tie together, and then they also have a Dark Secret.
Yep.
How much have you leaned on those two components of the players to drive kind of the campaign or the story?
Let's see. I'm looking at their dark secrets. Let me peek. For sure, one of them was a big part of like it was part of a story arc. Um, the thief has a dark secret about just taking everything, like steals whatever. So that has come up as like a subplot and things where the thief has like taken something and there's been repercussions for it. The dark secret one comes up every now and then. It um it gets a player an experience point, so it's cool for them if it comes up. The pride one actually has a mechanical purpose. So, and that's come up a couple times, and there are, I think, at least two characters who lost their pride because they failed a roll while you like. So if you when you use your pride, you get a success. Um, I think it's a success. But whatever, if you are not successful in the action you're taking when you use your pride, you lose it. Like you have like a little crisis of confidence, and then you have to go a session without a pride, and then you can pick a new one. So that has happened before. Had characters who've had to like change their pride because it didn't pan out for them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. The dark secret one, you could lean into it heavily. Like we got to a point where they kind of like some of them outstripped theirs, but like one of them one of my players, and this one's come out, so I don't have a problem mentioning it, but one of my players killed a Rust brother. And that becomes a problem a lot because the Rust brothers have kind of figured out who they are because it's a elf, a dwarf, and a goblin. So it's not hard to put out word. Like if an elf and a dwarf and a goblin show up together in a town, like we want these guys.
An alpha dwarf and a goblin walk into a bar.
Right. Arrest them. Yeah.
So who are the Rust brothers, for those that don't know?
They are the religious followers. So this game's got some like really messy religions. Like
Got some
and
lore.
it's got first of all, it's got a ton of lore. It's got more lore than the players are going to know, and scarily more lore than a GM's going to remember.
That's my biggest fear. Like, what's this tied to? And then you're like,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah. I multiple times I've had to like open up the book and be like, yeah. And that's what the legends help with, is like if you put those legends out, it kind of ties things together. But you still have to know a bunch of that lore. But also, I like didn't lean on that heavily in the beginning of the game, so we kind of like eased into it. So it became a little easier, but I have on multiple occasions reread sections of it. And yeah, the gods are messy because the gods are half the gods are just different interpretations. Like one group was like, no, this thing was more important, therefore there are these gods, and the other group is like, no, you misunderstand, it's this way, thus these gods. So the Rust brothers are the followers of the god of Rust. It's their cleric, and they are generic fantasy bad guys. Like they are, they've got some knights, the Iron Guard, I think they're called, and there's the Rust brothers, and they're just generally bad. But they are like the only they're the only religion that like actually spreads out from anywhere. Like everything else is in pockets and kind of scattered, but the Rust brothers like show up in places. So in my game, the appearance of the Rust brothers is never a good moment. And the players are now facing that because they're the place they are on the map, their stronghold is on the opposite side of there's a town on the opposite side of the lake, and the Rust brothers have invaded that town. So there's getting to be this point where the Rust brothers are getting closer to their stronghold, and they're now like, think we're going to have to go deal with these guys.
Fantastic. I want to go to the chat quick, and I don't know if I might have skipped anybody that put in there. I know somebody asked about the virtual tabletop, which I was going to get back to you. Like,
Yep.
wait, how are you running it? Sounds like Roll20.
So Roll20's got a full Roll20's got a full module for this, so that it's got character sheets that will build the dice pools and roll them, which is, it takes a little getting used to how to make the dice pools in the character sheet, but like my players like use it exclusively, and it like rolls all the correct dice and shows you the results. It lets you push rolls and things like that. I just imported the map, and I think they have an image on their website. Like I imported the map directly into the website. And one of the things you have to do in the game is when you're traveling, if you've been through a hex before, you don't have to make what's called the Pathfinder roll. So on my home map, there are just pen marks, like little X's in the bottom of each hex as they went through it. On the virtual tabletop, I've had to put little symbols into it so that we know, like, when we're playing, like, oh, this hex, you guys have been through it, you don't have to make this roll, keep going. So yeah, no, I have one tabletop of the big map, and then I often take the maps from the book, those isometric drawings, and then I will throw them in, put over the fog of war, and just reveal it in chunks as we play through it. That seems to that's been working really well. Plus, the other thing that's really cool is then if you do handouts, I just copy the legend text and stuff those in the handouts, and now the players have like a library of those legends, because now after like a year and a half, they have a ton of legends, and occasionally they don't remember them all. So they very conveniently are just like, oh yeah, open up the, like click, they open up the legend, or I'll just open it up and put it on the screen for them and, jog their memories. So it works great it works great. I will say there was one thing missing that I had to put together myself, and Free League was very nice. The game uses cards for initiative. Yes. And they were not originally, I don't think they're in the game. I wound up making them myself from the images of the cards. So I have an initiative deck that when we're playing, I can shuffle and deal out to the players, and then they can rearrange, like trade cards with each other to set the initiative, and then we go from there. And then I use the turn order tool once everybody's initiative to put them in turn order, and then just go through the turn order feature.
Do you use Fog of War on the large hex map, or do you give them the whole map and they can see the whole thing? And
I gave them the whole map because that's how, like, when we started playing, they always had that. Like, when we played at home, they just had that map out on the table.
I'm going to use Foundry, Phil.
Oh, I haven't tried Foundry yet.
I will. Let me know if you're ever interested. I'm going to start. I mean, I've been saying this for a little bit, but I want to start showing people it so that they can say, oh, it's, great, because they don't, it's a $50 upfront investment. And then it depends on how you want to host it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I'm definitely curious about that. I was never one for online playing. I was fortunate enough to always have a home group,
sure.
But that, in the days of the lockdown, all my gaming is now done online. So I'm always interested. Like, I like Roll20. Roll20 is great, and I've had it since some Kickstarter I backed like 100 years ago.
Hero Forge or whatever
Yes, the one that they wound up buying. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I got defaulted into an account on it, so, which was good, because like when lockdown happened, like I was immediately like, you guys want to keep playing, right? Like, you want to use Roll20? And I think within the course of a week, I had flipped all my games over to it.
The optional combat piece, like where you pick two cards secretly and then you compare them and flip them.
I have not used that mechanic yet.
It's in Foundry. They have a module that allows you to do that. And what happens is you launch it and it comes up, it runs a macro, right? So it goes, pick the player of the game that you're going to do this with. And as long as the player's in there, you pick that from the drop down. and it pops up a screen on their end with the cards.
Oh, nice. And they can select.
Yep.
Yeah, we've never. So in a year and a half, I have not used that combat system.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I've just used the generic combat system of, just making, everybody just making normal rolls and stuff like that. I should at some point consider dragging it out, but now I would have to look at how I'd implement it in Roll20.
For those of you not in the know, it's an optional rule where I think it's 8 cards or 7 cards. Yeah. It's and what happens is if a player decides to do a particular task, usually combat based, I think, you can opt to use this alternate version, which is more of a one-on-one basis with the GM and the player, so it's not anybody else. And then the 8 cards come up. Typically, you'd have them in your hand and you'd set them down, the 2 cards that you choose. So you choose 2. It could be parry and feint or something along those lines. I forget which all of them are entitled, but they have mechanical values to them. And then the game master selects them. And in Foundry, in face-to-face, you have your hand, the player has their hand, they take the 2 cards, put it down, and then you reveal them and you compare them to each other. And in kind of a sequence, right? So 1 to 1 and then 1 to the other. And which in a virtual tabletop can be kind of tricky to pull off. And in Foundry, it does it by pulling it up on the player side. The player picks 2 and then hits ready or done. And then the GM does it. And as long as both of them are done, then they are revealed to both. They kind of flip over.
Yeah.
And then you kind of narrate it out. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's one-on-one. That's been like one of the most of my fights have not been one-on-one. So I've just been like, let's do this, just use the generic system, which works just fine. And yeah, now that we're online, I don't think those cards are in Roll20 yet. I could make them, right? If I took the images, I could put them together and do it. But it reminds me a lot of the combat. It reminds me a bit of the combat system from Burning Wheel.
I was gonna say, yeah, Burning Wheel.
Yeah, Burning Wheel's got something similar to that, which always frustrated me anyway, because Burning Wheel works great if you're fighting one-on-one, and then when you're not, it doesn't then it's just a mess anyway.
Is it the Duel of Wits?
No, there's 2 of them, right? Duel of Wits is one of them, and then there is a combat system that is just like Duel of Wits, which is like its own its own system, it's its own mini system in the middle of that game. Sure. That's why that's why that game's always been a pain for me to learn. It's 5 discongruent mini systems wrapped in a full game. I saw a question go by way early on. Somebody had asked about the dice.
Yes.
So I'll mention the dice. Do you need the dice that they sell? The answer is you don't. But you need 3 different color dice, and I highly recommend because I had players do this early on. In fact, I did it early on too, because I didn't even have dice early on. Get dice. They're all 6s, but get them in the same colors that they are in the book, which is red, white, and black. If you wind up doing blue, green, and yellow, you're going to be constantly which ones are my skill dice, which ones are my equipment dice, which ones are my base dice. And it's important because it's important because in the game, successes are 6s. That's easy. All the dice have 6s on them. And in fact, they just put these 2 little swords to make it, kitschy. The important part is that 2 of the 3 sets of dice do damage when you roll 1s. The 3rd one does not. Skill dice do not hurt you, but base dice, which are your stats, and equipment dice, when you roll 1s, they hurt you only if you push. And then it's important because you need to know how many points of damage you took to your stats, but you also need to know how many points of damage you took to your equipment, because you can actually break your equipment in this game. So that's a whole thing in this game, is you can, if you push yourself too hard, you can hurt yourself, actually do damage, and you do not have a lot of hit points in this game, and you can break your gear. I had a player who had our druid has a spear and has had 10 spears. They've broken their spear so many times that eventually the dwarf just made her an iron spear. It was like, I have to make you something that's going to last a whole adventure. I'm like sick of trying to like he's out in the woods like trying to carve her a new spear like like between every fight. So
Now with oh, and I was gonna say something about the dice, and now it just escaped me. Shoot.
oh, I'll say one more thing about them. They sell them in like they sell a pack of them. I will be honest, you need 2 packs. Like you really like 1 pack is almost enough dice, but 2 packs makes it a lot easier. When you get to the monsters, like the monsters have like much higher dice pools, and you wind up digging into them a bit more. So I have like 2 sets of them. They're from Q Dice. They're not the cheapest thing, but I didn't have them in the beginning, and I had different colors, and it sucked. Like it really, like if I had one thing to do, I would have just gone, like I would have just gone and bought generic black, white, and red dice, and I would have made it 100 times easier for myself.
You. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So you mentioned pushing, and if you fail, you get like ones,
Yeah.
but you also get willpower from that.
Yep, which is a great little, so design-wise, it's an awesome little loop. So willpower is this currency in the game that you use to activate higher level abilities. Use it to activate magic, and um, you use it to activate your higher level talents. Usually your first level talents just give you like a bonus to something, but your higher level talents often require a willpower spend. So what the game does really nicely is if you want willpower, you have to push rolls. Like you can't play it safe, and when you push rolls, you run the risk of hurting yourself or breaking your equipment. So you wind up in this like little loop where you are always running yourself down. And I will say, like it is tough in this game, like you can die pretty easily in this game. We misunderstood a rule early on in the game, and then when we discovered it, we just decided we were never going to change the way we used it, which makes the game even harder. So like when you take damage to an attribute, you're supposed to roll less dice in that attribute.
Yes.
Yeah, it gets really hard, right? Like if you have like a 3 in an attribute and you take damage, right? Like your impact to those pools goes really quick. We just misunderstood that in the beginning. So
So marking them down, but still rolling the same amount of dice.
yeah. And I was like, you know what? This is our heroic option for this game. And we were like it's one of those things like we missed it when we read it and like started playing, and then we just got so used to it that I was like, I'm not going back and fixing this. Like, is everybody cool? We'll just house rule it from this point on. This is our heroic option. And everybody was good, and we were just like, fine, let's move on.
So Craig mentioned in the chat from Third Floor Wars, he wanted to talk like, I know you specifically are big on safety. Everybody should be.
Mm-hmm.
Some are more elaborate than others, but can you go into a little bit about what you talk about safety in your game, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I have like a little set safety, like almost quote kit, and it's pretty straightforward, right? So the things, and I play with the same people a lot, right? So I have like a pretty solid group. So we wind up doing this pretty quickly because like we kind of know each other's, boundaries for most stuff. So I always start with like a content warning, right? If this game has anything in it that I think is going to be troublesome, this game doesn't really, like, unless you're not really into body horror and stuff. But like my group was fine with that. But I always start with a content warning if the game's going to have anything intense. Like I said, nothing really in Forbidden Lands. Then we do what's called lines and veils. So things that we just don't want in the game, and things that we don't want in detail in the game. All right, so lines and veils is a pretty standard feature. So like we might not want like no child abuse. Like we don't want to see any Rust Brothers punching little kids in town. Kind of thing. So that's fine. So we just line that out, right? So we're just not going to have that in the game. I'm not going to introduce it in the game. They're not going to bring it up in the game. And then we veil out things like, and again, not a thing that's really come up in this game, but like in a lot of my games, a standard veil is like sex, like, characters, NPCs, PCs, whatever, can have sex. We don't talk about it in detail. Like as soon as it happens, you just kind of and on to the next scene. All right, lines and veils. So that sets boundaries. And then the last piece, I am a big fan of the X card, which is basically a consent revoking tool. Right. So this is the idea that if something comes up in the game, no matter even if it wasn't covered in lines and veils, if it comes up and you don't, like you don't like it, makes you uncomfortable, feel unsafe, you just hit the X card and we take it out. And that's like my foundation right there, right? Like up front, like informing everybody what's in the game, setting some boundaries about content we want in the game and don't want in the game, and then always having a way to say no. And if a game I'm playing is more elaborate or emotionally raw than that, like I'll beef that toolkit up. But that's like my pretty standard for a pretty generic game. And I consider this one like a low danger game, right? Like it's generic fantasy. Like I just need some base safety in here. Put some like put some railings up. I don't have to baby proof the whole house. I just need to put some railings up, like on the staircases kind of thing.
I so I am not a big fan of playing. So Stacy, who had been at Queen City Conquest at one time, Della Ferrano, had mentioned, excuse me, that they do not, are not in favor of being in a game where the X card is used because Stacy had, and I'm really messing this up, but it had alluded to basically saying, if there are some of those issues in this game, then I don't want to play in that game. Like if it's even just broached. Now, that's somewhat how I kind of take it, me personally. But obviously, I've changed over time because I'm playing like with more people that I don't know really well. Like with Phil and some of his home group. Like if I play with Jeff and my buddies, it's probably a different conversation, or we know what could possibly set them off a little bit or make them uncomfortable. But so keep in mind that if you haven't implemented any type of safety, things that you may think is not a big deal, like, hey, I don't understand how this would tie into it. Brett, early on in our show, if you've listened to 300 episodes, Brett has played he likes horror games sometimes, Call of Cthulhu. Sure. He tries I wouldn't say shock value because he's not Saw. He doesn't like runs like the movie Saw games. Yeah. But he does try to make things uncomfortable in horror, and he wants to kind of unsettle you to some degree, and he plays with his home group. And early on in the show, we're talking about dead babies, right? And if you are running anybody that may have lost the child, that could be a huge issue. Right. So
yes. And this is why I don't believe in any one safety tool. Like this is why I believe like you gotta chain these things together. Right. So Stacy's not wrong in that if this content's going to be in the game, I don't want to play in it. That's like where the content warning comes in.
Right.
So like if I tell you at the outset of a game, like, hey, I'm doing this horror game and like I got some dead babies in this game. Right. Whether I'm playing with my home group or whether I'm playing at a con, like if I say that before we even start the game, somebody could be like, oh, dead babies, totally out. Right. And just leave leave the table or whatever. And in that case, like good, like not good. Like I want you gone, but like, I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable when I'm running a game. Right. So if this is a thing that, is potentially going to make you uncomfortable, absolutely, please don't play in this game. If everybody else is okay with it, then like we proceed from there. And the thing for me with the X card is it's impossible to know, especially if you're playing with strangers at a con, it is impossible to know what things are going to be upsetting to people. So there's no way you can ever content warn enough, right? Like, or you can't content warn to everybody's level of specificity. I can hit the obvious ones, like, hey, we're gonna do this game. It's serious body horror, right? Does anyone have any body horror things? Like, for me, like, I'll give an example, and it'll sound light, but like 2 years ago, I like really broke my arm, right? Like I fell on ice and like snapped my arm into. I have 13 pins and like 2 plates in it, like stuck back together. And to this day, I still get kind of wigged out because I can remember what my arm looked like when I woke up on the ground and was like, it's not where it's supposed to be, right? Like,
Whoa.
I mean, you know this. I mean, you've been in a major accident, right? Like, you know that, like that sick feeling you get with it. Well, there's no way anyone knows that. Like, especially if I sit down at a table now, you can't see. Like, I mean, I still got giant scar, but you don't know that. So the content warning is the great place to just let people know. But again, because we never can know what everybody, what is going to be upsetting to everybody, like having the X card in there is just a nice way to skirt the point when it gets upsetting. Like if I was playing with you, and I'll try not to make this too graphic, but like if your character got into a car accident and then I started like diving into the description of it, you might be like, hey brother, like, can we just pull back from that, because that's actually happened to me and I'm super uncomfortable about it. Like that's a great place to be like, absolutely got it, like totally, totally no problem, like, let's jump to the next scene.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just something to consider when you're running games for those that, especially with folks that you're not wholly familiar with, it doesn't hurt.
Right. And I'll say the other thing, like when I run con games, I don't push any limits. Like when I run con games, like I am not out there to be like, I'm going to put this content right on the edge of like, where people are comfortable. I will do that with my home group, because like my home group, I know and I can have a deeper conversation with, but like when I like run stuff at cons, like it's pretty straightforward. I will put a content warning on it, but I'm fairly certain we're all going to be okay. Like I've actually never had an X card come up in one of my con games, because like, I don't know, it's not my job to like it's not my job to wig you out. Like I'm not Wes Craven, like not Wes Craven the GM here. Like it's not my like,
Right.
yeah. So
Now going back to the game, thanks for the safety. That's definitely helpful.
no problem.
Absolutely. Now, how Wayne mentioned in the chat, asked about, because I think you alluded to it, but have all your player characters survived from day one all the way up till now?
So they have, not easily, right? Like I mean, multiple players have been down in the game. Having the druid has been a big help because the druid has healing. And there isn't a ton of things that heal in this game, but having magical healing has made all the difference. But it has required me, like you have to, you don't have to be careful. It's a combination. It doesn't take much to overwhelm players, and players have to be smart enough to know when to get the hell out. Like like the monsters that are in the GM section of the game, some of them are not trivial. Like I actually don't know. Like I was reading the Raven's Purge and I was reading the end game section of it, and it gives the stats for like the final creatures. And I'm looking at them like, I don't know how my players could face this. Like I don't think they'll live like through like any of these encounters. And yeah, like in this case, this is where I think Forbidden Lands winds up a little more on the old school side, which I like, is like one, killing every encounter you run into is not always the best idea. There have been multiple times where the players have negotiated their way, snuck past things, run out. Like there have been a couple occasions where they've just like seen it and we're like, "F no, we're out of here," and that's fine. Like, and one of the things like when you're traveling is there's this lookout roll where if you make the lookout roll, you see the encounter before it's on top of you. And there have been multiple times where the players have looked at an encounter and went, nope, we'll just lay low in the bushes till this thing passes, which is fine. Like you are not bulletproof in this game. And yeah, like there has only been, we lost Bob's character almost died from being healed because the wizard had a magical mishap, and it said the spell does the opposite of its intended effect.
Oops.
Yeah, whoops. Almost took Bob out. But yeah, it's I mean the players all know, like if one of these guys don't make it, like they'll all be fine and we'll move on from there. But so far, they've been lucky, but they also are fully aware. Like some of them have like I think the elf has like a 3 strength, which means they have like basically 3 hit points. right?
Yeah.
Like so armor, like armor, and also like stay out of melee. Like that's why the druid carries the spear. Like get them before they get you mentality. And the dwarf is the tip of the dwarf is in the front line. Like Bob's character has like 6 hit points. He's fully armored, helmet, shield, like the whole 9 yards, and he's been knocked on his ass a few times. So yeah, it's different in that respect. In that respect, I think it's a little more old school where you really got to pick. Like you got to pick your moments, like ambush things, um, you know, run,
Right.
run, run is a totally valid move in this game.
Yeah. For those of you not in the know, you have your 4 core abilities, and one of them strength, and it's probably a score from 2 to 5. I think is around average. If you get a
Yeah,
talent, you could get near 6. But if you get broken, which is losing all of your so when Phil was mentioning earlier, you make a roll and you push it, and your ones come into play, and it's a strength based test.
yep,
You nix those strength points off your
yeah,
character. So 1, 2, 3, damage, or 1 or 2, and you're down 2 dice for
yep.
strength based tests, and you're, two
You get
less, two closer to
points.
death. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and so when you zero out any one of those stats, so it's called breaking. Now you can't break on a push. That's one of the rules. Like you never break on a push, but if you get hit one more time, you instantly break. There are critical damage tables, so a la Roll Master, and they're pretty good, right? Like they're pretty good. I will tell you this as a player tip. Um, all of our fighters, so Bob's our main fighter, invested in the talent that any hit he gets to roll on that table, and that helps immensely in taking down like NPCs and stuff like that, because some of those roll, like if he gets a decent enough roll on that table, like he can do extra damage and take someone out pretty quickly. So yeah, but that table's great. Like if you liked Rollmaster back in the day, you will read that table and you will know where these items came from.
so how much do you use the random tables in just, I mean, there's some and truly roll on them, or do you pick and then use
I don't know.
them, or, yeah.
Now I'm like a purist on this thing. So in the GM's book, they give you like this table for encounters, and I live by this table. So when they're out, when they're out traveling, and again, no hand waving for traveling, right? Like if they're going to go across the map to an adventure site, you play out the travel. I roll those encounters, and then the only thing I do is I have little post-it notes that I've marked if they've encountered this before. Because some of them are generic and I can just have it come back. Like there's like one where like you encounter a pocket of blood mist, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's reusable. But some of the other ones, like there's one in the forest, like you come upon a wedding. Like there's 2 people getting married in the forest, and you come upon this like giant wedding party, and they tell you like the bride is an orc, the groom's a human, and the neither family wants them to get married, and you like stumble into the middle of this encounter. And now those 2 people run the inn at our character stronghold because they they stumbled into this thing in a hex and like got involved in this like whole family drama and broke it. Like they diffused it before it happened, and like the newlyweds were like they were like, hey, if you want a place where people aren't going to harass you for being an orc and a human, you could come to our stronghold. And they were like, great, well we'll see you in a few weeks. And they did. So now but yeah, like those I mark off, like this encounter's done, like we can't have this encounter again. But I use that table, and actually a year and a half into it, I kind of need more encounters. I was a little disappointed that they have not made a product that's like more planes encounters.
Mhm.
I'm gonna actually now have to go do that work myself.
So, so what does prep look like for you, Phil? How do you prep for this game?
So it depends on which phase of the game we're in, right? So my players now have a stronghold. Um, and so there are like 3 phases of this game. Like either they're in the stronghold and we're doing some combination of like stuff that's happening in the stronghold, like people coming to visit or whatever. So there's some like role play stuff or things like that, and there's there's a whole subsystem for resource gathering and building things. So like there's a part of the game where we have to stop and there's like a spreadsheet where they're like, okay, well, it's been 7 weeks of game time. By the way, for my real hardcore players, I have an actual calendar because accurate timekeeping in this campaign is critical.
You can't have a how's the saying? You
can't have a campaign without accurate timekeeping.
Gygax.
Yes, as Gygax as it gets. I actually have a Google spreadsheet that has the calendar in it, and so there are times where, like, when they're on the road, I just mark it like travel, adventure. But when they come back to the their stronghold, like we'll let like weeks go by. So I'll be like, okay, a month has gone by. Calculate how much stone your quarry has produced, how much iron, how much wood. What are you building in your stronghold? So that's one set of prep. Then they're traveling to a site, which can be its own session or more, depending on how far they go. I got like almost no prep for that because I totally rely on the random tables. Like, we're just play through and see what happens. And then the adventure sites, I'm using all the ones that are published in the book, but the book does not make you do anything you don't want to do. So like, they give you an adventure site and they give you like 3 things you could possibly do in it, 4 ways the players could stumble on it. So you have to do like a little assembly. Like, you got to decide, like, okay, which pieces of this whole pile of stuff they gave me do I want to actually focus on? Which isn't bad at all. Like, it's great. So yeah, and the game like the game plays out in those phases where they're at the stronghold and then they suddenly, like, either somebody tells them or they're through some like library research, they're like, oh, we got to go to this location, and I'll highlight it on the map, like, well, it's over here, and then there's like a session or 2 to get there, several sessions adventuring in there, and then no hand waving, 2 sessions to come home. And then when they get home, it's like, well, now we're back at the stronghold. We got to like catch up on we got to catch up on bookkeeping, resources, what has happened in town in in the 4 weeks you've been gone, like all of those things. So it's like 3 phases that we just play in a loop. Like, my players are, they just finished the stronghold phase and they're just getting ready to go back out on the road. I don't know for how long, but they're going out on the road because they have to deal with the Rust brothers across the lake now. Like, they've reached a point where they're like, this is intolerable. Like, we can't leave the Rust brothers up to their own devices. They're going to wind up coming across the lake at us. Let's get them first. So,
wait, who's it in the chat? Yeah, Phil or Magic Mike on it. Mentioned, how long did it take for your players to go from you guys starting to building their stronghold? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I let them. I did it the easy way, which is we used the Weatherstone, which is the second adventure site. They played through the adventure site, and then I was like, "Well, it's a ruined castle." They're like, "We want to keep it," and I was like, "Okay." So I like went through and like I told them, I was like, "All right, here's like a few things that are actually still intact that you can use. Here's a bunch of stuff that's broken." So I gave them like, if you put half of the stone back into the wall, like, you can have the wall, the walls again on the on it. So we did that, and so like they rebuilt Weatherstone from the ground up, which was fun. But it's a different time scale. So like, where they travel for like a week or 2 and they adventure for a couple days on site, they'll go home and like they didn't adventure all of winter.
Oh,
Because they were like, well, because in winter there's only 2 of the 4 quarters of the day that have sunlight.
right.
So travels a lot harder. So, and you have to deal with cold and everything else. So they were like, you know what? Our next expedition will be in the spring. We'll spend the winter in Weatherstone and build it up. So again, accurate timekeeping is the
I was thinking about that in my head. I'm like, man, I am gonna have to bust out a calendar of some kind and keep a track of this, because it's not. I mean, you could in many games you start a session, end a session.
Yeah.
A couple hours in the game have gone by, but 8 have gone by in real time.
Yep.
And then you have travel, and then encounter. You're just going to be all over the place on how long it takes to do anything. You could.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this quick, so have you aged the characters? How long have they aged?
No, it's only been in the game. It's been, I don't even think it's been a full year yet.
Oh, okay.
Based on the calendar. They started in, I think, the summer. Yeah, it's almost going to be a full calendar year for the characters. But we I track that thing week to week. Like that's that is definitely a thing. Like there is a week to week tracking of what happens. And again, some of it is if they're in their keep, then we will hand wave time. And I'll ask them, like, how long do you guys want to stay here before you head out again? Nobody celebrated. I don't know if the characters have picked out their birthdays.
Jason in the chat has anybody celebrated birthday?
It's a thing that it's a thing that like normally you don't think about in a game, right? Because you never really spend a lot of time tracking. Like I never have in a fantasy game before kept a calendar. Like I've not been very Gygaxian about this.
Shame on you, Phil.
Stuff. I make that Gygaxian joke like almost every session when I open up the calendar. Like, we need to keep our accurate calendar here, guys. Like, yeah, it's funny. But yeah, like when they're on the road, the scale is different because you actually play day to day, right? There's 4 quarters in a day, and so you play like each quarter. That's another thing. I wound up having to make my own little counter to keep track of the quarters of the day, especially if like we stopped somewhere and hadn't like ended on an evening. So I made this little spinner. I got all crafty. I made this little spinner.
Beastie Boys crafty.
Yeah. And like you can change it, like here's the day, right? So day into evening, right? And then night. And I just when we were playing, I just kept it on the table. When we play online, I just kind of keep it in front of me and just move it along. But it has effects when they're traveling because there's only so much sunlight and there's penalties for traveling at night. So, typically it's, wake up in the morning, break camp, ride for like 2 segments and then, make camp, sleep through the evening, because sleep is how you get your hit points back.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on you don't sleep, you don't get hit points, and you're tired the next day.
Yeah, so my players were coming home from a visit to their allies to the north, this dwarven enclave, and they screwed up 2 nights of sleep rolls. And they were in like seriously bad shape when they got home. Like they had a couple of encounters and they couldn't heal from them except magically. They were tired. They were cold. Like they were a mess. Like never, like they were nervous about actually getting home. Like they were like, we have got to get home tonight. We can't have another, we can't fail another camping check, or we're not going to make it. Oh, somebody asked where I got the arrow. I bought it I think I bought it on Amazon. Like you can just buy spinner arrows, like they're game components. Yeah. And I just, punched a hole in the center and snapped the little thing in there.
All right. So we're a little over the hour. Are you still good, Phil?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good.
Now, so kind of get things wrapping up. Some of the things that, given the year of time that you've run it, what kind of advice would you give a game master that would start to run this game? And what kind of advice would you give players? So it's overarching. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the GM, like think small. Like this is not like Lord of the Rings Dragonlance fantasy, right? This is small, like in the dirt, mud on your boots fantasy. So you can your stories can be small. You can do bigger things, but everything in this game is on the ground, and don't ever hand wave travel, right? Like travel is a feature, not a bug in this game. So like, it's going to just take you a while. Like, an adventure is long because you have to go and get there, and the adventure to get there is its own adventure. So lean in heavily on those things. Um, I would also say the one-on-one combat thing is like a later, like don't even try learning it in the beginning. Skip that whole section and just get the main combat system down, the group combat system. Um, and know that their published material has their published material is like IKEA, like
Mm.
some assembly is required. Like you can't just pick up the adventure and just be like, cool, I'm going to run this. You really have to like kind of look at the adventure and decide, I'm going to put these pieces together and play through. And then after that, it's you're just gonna, you're gonna have to learn the couple subsystems, right? There's there's main task resolution, there's combat, there's magic, which is not terribly complicated but requires a little bit of learning. Travel, later the stronghold has its own mechanics, and crafting. Because it's almost like Minecraft. Like honestly, you're on the road, and somebody breaks a sword. Like, if you can get to a town with a forge, you can fix it, right? Or either pay someone or fix it yourself. If you're a smith, if your bow breaks, you can actually just fix that on the road, right? Like, you can just take a quarter day and get some wood and actually carve out a bow and be back up and running. So there's those like little subsystems. Like, you're gonna eventually learn them all, but learn the main system, combat and travel first. The other ones you'll pick up along the way. As a player, you are fragile. like like all out attacks are not always your best friend. Sneak attacks, knowing when to run. I will say I have one grudge. I do not like their withdraw from combat is like almost every other one, where there's like I think it allows you have to make a roll or you take a hit. I like that better than like, you just take a hit, but withdrawing from combat is a thing. Like, sometimes you just got to get out. And then use your experience points to buy the talents. The raising your skills can be expensive. Talents are relatively cheap, and the talents come like in a mixture of things. They're like feats, right? So like, some of them are combat related. You should get some, and the other ones, which will not seem important when you look at them, there are ones about travel. So like, there's one called Quartermaster, which improves your roll to camping. Which you don't like. You're gonna look at it first and be like, that seems dumb, until you fail a camping roll and no one sleeps and you can't heal, right? So like we have like one character who's the Quartermaster. We have one character who's the Pathfinder, right? Like, those camping things. We have one character who can cook, somebody who can sew. Like, those other skills wind up being way more important than you think they will be in the course of the game. So you want to like kind of balance your investment. Like, our dwarf is a nightmare with a axe in his hand, and also a very competent blacksmith and carpenter, and our thief is also a tailor, right? Very Garrick of him, but our thief is also a tailor, because sometimes like the tent needs fixing while you're on the road, because the tent is equipment dice, and sometimes you push and you rip the tent, and now you need the tent. So those are like the tips for the players. You got to balance out those talents. Like, you need to be as good at camping as you are at fighting, as strange as that sounds for a role playing game.
Oh, that's all good stuff. What about bookkeeping? There was a question about bookkeeping. Bookkeeping?
I don't think it's too bookkeeping. Like, the calendar is necessary, more so when you have the stronghold. Like, I didn't really have to lean on the calendar until I had to start worrying about like, how much iron does this mine produce in a given amount of time. When you're on the road, you're living day to day. And then you just kind of need to know the seasons, because there are effects. Like, there are daylight is a factor in the seasons, so it's not huge. And when you get up to stronghold, like, there is a separate Google spreadsheet we have for the stronghold that keeps track of all the resources it generates, everybody that is in the place that you have to pay, because you can't just run it. You can't run it yourself and leave. Like if you don't hire a guard and you leave your stronghold, you'll come back and find someone else in it.
Right.
So
It's easy. They built it for them.
yeah. So you need to have like a guard or two. There's a handy person, otherwise things break down. Like having a stronghold is like actually buying a house. Like it is a money sink. Like you suddenly go to adventuring becomes the thing you need to do to keep like your stronghold in one piece again. So yeah, like I think you graduate to a higher level of bookkeeping in this game when you get to the stronghold. Before that, it's I don't think it's insurmountable. I would recommend keeping a calendar though. Like that is, go back and read your Gary Gygax game mastering book on the calendar chapter. Like it will benefit you greatly.
For the spreadsheet for the players, do they keep that or do you, or is it kind of a collaborative effort?
I keep the calendar.
Okay.
They keep the stronghold. So there are sessions where literally I'm sitting there while they're deciding, like, should we build a moat or should we build a sheep pen, right? And like, like I don't. Those are the days I jot some other notes down and stuff. But like, they need to have those discussions. Like, they need to, do we hire another guard, like that kind of thing.
That's good stuff.
Yep.
Well, last questions out of the chat, and then we're gonna let Phil go. This sounds fantastic. I'm interested in kicking this off. Session 0 will be this coming Thursday for me, February 4th, with a group of 4 players, and
it's a good sized party.
Yeah, we haven't talked about whether they're going to do random or they're going to be. Did they do random for you? Did they do random character gen, or did they?
No, they definitely wanted to pick their they wanted to pick their stuff. They did, I think, roll the background stuff random, but they were like, we would like to pick our kin and class, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like,
Yeah, there was a good podcast that I'm trying to absorb fast enough that had a pretty decent session 0, Three Skulls Tavern. I don't know.
That's the name of the tavern in the Hollows.
Oh, it
Three
is.
Skulls Tavern.
I didn't even know that reference. Okay.
Yeah. Three Skulls Tavern.
Interesting. So he's
a large part of my game.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting. I'm trying to absorb it all and determine. And I think there was some he had some home house rules, like because of the fragility of the character starting out. I think he gave them a couple bumps in skills. Like you can put a point in 3 skills, 3 points in skills.
Yeah.
But he lowered something else and to give him a little bit of an edge. But I just want to make sure. Yeah, bookkeeping, Murder Hobo mentioned. We just covered that, Murder Hobo. Anything else from the chat? I want to know from Phil before we let him go. So I am interested in kicking it off. There's been one person I think that's played a couple, maybe 2-3 sessions. I think Kerrigan might have kicked off. Everybody in the group has the game, so they've kind of
that's
a little bit, yeah. But it's a different game than what I'm used to running.
Yeah, it's definitely different for me. Like I did not think, like when I started playing it, I was like, we'll get like 6 sessions out of this thing. It'll be great. I did not think we'd be heading into session 40. Nor do I run a lot of fantasy. Like I'm normally not the guy who runs a lot of fantasy, but like I don't know, there's just something about this game. Like it's doing it. Like my players love it. I'm enjoying it. Like it's good. I would probably, even after this game, come back and homebrew a setting for it. Like I like these mechanics. Like I think I would come back and homebrew a game. I just don't know how different it would be at this point, right? Like the players have played through a good chunk of this, like the rules. So
yeah, I'm kind of on the fence with the homebrew. I could see the appeal to it because then you don't have to reference any lore. You don't have to go, hey, is this right or is that wrong? And you could still do that regardless. Mm-hmm. But I feel compelled to go, oh, yeah. Where if you're doing homebrew, I mean, it's whatever you come up with. Like, hey, yep, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Their setting is was a little different for me. I'm used to just homebrew. Like I'm used to crafting all of this stuff myself. But I've gotten good at like putting the pieces that I want together and just kind of throwing some other stuff out. And there are a couple places where there are a couple places where I've caught a couple of like logical mistakes where I've had to like in mid game, like, oh shit, like that doesn't make sense, and like had to fix it on the fly. But yeah, it like it's good. Like there's more than enough material in the game to play it for a while.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned enjoying it.
Yes.
Why do you enjoy it? What's the selling piece of it? And
Yeah, for me, what I really like about the game is like I really don't know what's going to happen. Like I am, as I know your love of railroads.
somebody mentioned referencing
and-
how am
as
I
I know
going to
you-
adapt to it without the railroad? Yeah.
I know, yeah. I mean, I also many years ago was very much I was a rail conductor myself. I was a very skilled rail.
Hey, let's hear it for the rail union, huh?
I was a union man for a long time before I stopped before I just started off-roading my games. And what I really like about this game is like I really don't know what's going to happen. Like there's enough random, like when they hit the road, like I know what's going to happen when they get to the adventure site, kind of, because I know it's at the adventure site, although I have no idea how they're going to solve these problems. Because again, it's not a case where every problem is solved by fighting things. So in fact I just had this happen the other day, which I found immensely enjoying. Like they were trying to find this artifact, and there's like this giant that is guarding the artifact, and there are these like little I don't even remember what they're called, whiners, these little creatures. And ultimately, I don't want to, because it's part of the game, so I don't want to give too much away, but they convinced the whiners to go steal it for him. Like they made a deal with the whiners. Instead of like having to face the giant, they were like, look, we'll give you the thing you want if you'll just go get us this thing. And the whiners were like, I mean, I had them roll, but they were like, all right, like this is reasonable. Like let's. So what I enjoy out of the game is I really don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen when they're on the road, and it makes something mundane like traveling dangerous, which is fun. Like that mishap, their like 2 nights of camping mishap was like a moment in the game where I was like, these guys could die like on their way home from like a visit to their friends. Like they might not make it home. Like they're in bad shape. And I was like, I was excited. Like when they finally reached home, I was like, oh man, that was like real touch and go. So that's what I really like out of the game is like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm just like I'm as surprised as they are half the time. Like when I roll a random table and I'm like, you stumble into a wedding, like here we go. Let's and we just get right into it. So that's what I'm really enjoying out of it is that. And now I'm kind of digging how long the game's gone. Like there's a part of me that's also kind of digging like that they're becoming kind of entrenched in the world. Like they're not only entrenched, they're becoming something important.
They
like
have reputation. We didn't even talk about that.
They do. They have reputation, which shows up a lot now. Like they constantly get referred to as the Lords of Waterstone, or Weatherstone, Lords of Weatherstone. Like when they arrive in places, and they're like, yeah, like just kind of like on the DL guys, like, but they're like, your lordship, and they're like,
Goes both ways.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a problem for them because they're going to want to sneak into this town that the Rust brothers are controlling, and it's going to be a lot harder when you have an 8 reputation to sneak into anything. So should be good. So yeah, that's what I'm liking for the game. I did not expect to like this game as much as I like this game, which was cool.
I was surprised to hear that you had been running it that long, because we kind of spread the love around a little bit. Mm-hmm. So
I mean I play tons of stuff. I get antsy if I'm playing the same game for too long, but like I even asked my players, I'm like, you guys sure you still want to be playing this? They're like, no man, like don't do it, like just keep doing this. And I was like, all right, I'm good too, like we can just keep doing this.
That's fantastic. All right, well, let's wrap it up for Phil so he can go back and play some more Forbidden Lands. Phil,
I gotta go write show notes.
Yeah, that's always fun. So Phil, where can people find more of Phil Vecchione?
Yeah, so you can find me on Pandas Talking Games. That releases every Monday. That's like a 45-minute hour show where we just talk about gaming topics fielded by our listeners. Like we don't actually write our own ideas for that show. Very much whatever anybody wants us to talk about. And then you can find me Tuesday nights on Twitch live at 8 o'clock Eastern on Twitch on the Misdirected Mark Network, so you can see me on the Misdirected Mark show, or that show drops sometime. I think it's like Tuesdays or Wednesdays or something. I don't even know when my show drops, but you can find it where you find your normal podcast, including I think we finally conquered Spotify. Like I think we finally, it was not a lot. It was not easy. I think we finally got the shows up on Spotify now. So that's done. I occasionally, like once a month, write an article for Gnome Stew, and I haven't done much during the pandemic, but I do make games from time to time.
That's awesome. Well, hey man, thank you again. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I was happy to be here. This was fun. I don't normally get up early on a Saturday, but this was worth getting up early for. So
I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Phil, so much.
This has been a Litterbox Studio production.